In 1910, Sir John Mackenzie opened a fancy goods store in Dunedin, the first of what would be a chain of 75. Sir John established the J.R. Mackenzie Trust in 1940 with a donation of £100,000 and a commitment of 1/3 of the annual profits from the Mackenzie stores. With his time already consumed by a thriving business, he tasked Rotary clubs around the country with the job of distributing funds to families, communities and causes they deemed most in need. In 1980, the family stores were sold and Sir John's son, Sir Roy Mackenzie, became the chair of the J.R. Mackenzie Trust. Sir Roy was in his own right a leader in the philanthropic sector. The Trust's first strategic review was conducted in 2003. The review findings noted that just 2 to 3% of funds were allocated to Māori applicants. Terms of reference for the review included the question, how can the Trust's contribution to Māori be improved?
They decided on someone who was going to facilitate that hui, a Pākehā woman. I suggested they bring in hone whānga to help that facilitation, and so he came in and co-facilitated that strategic review.
We realised we had a blind spot, that we didn't have good connections or good support for the Māori world. Our mission at the time was improving the quality of life of New Zealanders who face disadvantage, and we just weren't reaching a whole lot of communities very well.
And the board at the time thought there's a better way of doing this, and it was found that Māori development was lacking completely. There was only one Māori board member and there was no emphasis given to Māori development.
Grandson of the Trust's founder, also John Mackenzie, was determined to follow through with the recommendations and was heard to say, "We're in catch-up mode now." Recommendations from the review suggested that J.R. Mackenzie organise relevant training for the board and staff, convene a Māori advisory group, develop relationships with Māori organisations, fund Māori organisations, including a small number of pilot projects, identify issues facing Māori, work with key Māori organisations. The Māori Landmark Initiative was established as a subcommittee of the J.R. Mackenzie Trust and was mandated to carry out the recommendations. Trustees met with prominent thought leaders of the Māori world, forming fledgling relationships as they went, and relevant training was provided for the Trust, including a session with Bob Considine about the Treaty of Waitangi.
And in those days there was only one Māori trustee on the board, so she and some of the other trustees in effect had a whiteboard. They were given a whiteboard and an opportunity to brainstorm and think, how can we make the best contribution given who we are? We don't have that much money, but we do have an independence that few other organisations have. It was about how can we both contribute better and contribute thoughtfully into the Māori world, and that was the overall mission for that committee.
In 2006, the Māori Landmark Initiative was given a new name, Te Kāwai Toro, meaning the shoot that reaches out, to better reflect the work of the subcommittee.
They had just started the proposals for Māori development. I was critical of some of the comments they made, and the usual story, if you're critical, then the best thing is put your biggest critic onto that committee and see how they go. And so this happened with me, and I was placed on the committee for Te Kāwai Toro. And my learning journey started from there.
Coming from the South Island, I've had very little to do with Māori as such, but I certainly learned a lot in my time with the TKT committee. Really admired what they were doing as far as the groundbreaking work in looking at Māori development and funding it.
In 2006, following meetings with Māori who identified whānau development as a priority, Te Kāwai Toro piloted a 3-year whānau development funded program and explored new ways of engaging with Māori and a new process of allocating funds. From 169 expressions of interest, the Te Kāwai Toro Committee chose 4 projects which were funded over a 3-year period. In 2007, the Trust appointed 2 Māori trustees and a full-time staff member whose role was to support the Trust in their work with Māori. Based on learnings from the Whānau Development Pilot Program, Te Kāwai Toro recommended that the J.R. Mackenzie Trust adopt a Māori development focus. In 2009, the J.R. Mackenzie Trust held a historic meeting at Ngā Toko Wari Marae, near Levin, the home of one of the 5 whānau development groups funded. At this hui, the board confirmed that the 5-year strategy, 2010 to 2015, will include a new vision, a socially just and inclusive Aotearoa New Zealand, and adopt 2 main focus areas: disadvantaged children and their families, and Māori development, both of which would receive at least a third of the Trust's funding. The funding process that Te Kāwai Toro had developed during its pilot program was also adopted as the main grant process across the J.R. Mackenzie Trust. A focus for the J.R. Mackenzie Trust on Māori development became challenging for some board and regional panel members to accept, resulting in their resignations.
Māori development was new, and it was very radical for the board at the time. It wasn't universally popular, but eventually those who weren't totally in favour moved on, and new people came on the board, and it was full sail ahead.
Te Kāwai Toro commissioned an evaluation of the whānau development pilot and shared the evaluation report via the J.R. Mackenzie website. The J.R. Mackenzie Trust became a member of the International Funders for Indigenous Peoples, an organisation based in San Francisco to support and grow philanthropic funding for Indigenous-led organisations and communities. In 2012, Te Kāwai Toro commissioned Business and Economic Research Limited to produce a report on philanthropic funding to Māori. The report noted a very low level of support for Māori from the philanthropic sector. 2 years later, another survey highlighted an even further reduction in grant funding to Māori. In 2014, a delegation from the Te Kāwai Toro Committee and representatives of 3 Māori development groups, supported by J.R. Mackenzie Trust, attended the International Funders for Indigenous Peoples Summit in New York. The J.R. Mackenzie Trust received the International Award for Indigenous-led grant-making. Manaia King, Chair of Te Kāwai Toro, accepted a position on the International Funders for Indigenous Peoples board. Te Kāwai Toro invited the International Funders for Indigenous Peoples to hold a regional meeting in Aotearoa, which was accepted. In 2015, Te Kāwai Toro approved the reviewed 5-year action plan, which included increasing funding avenues to Māori, building strategic relationships, i.e. with other funders regionally, nationally and internationally, supporting kaikōkiri, holding annual kaikōkiri hui in Wellington, the development of a Māori development assessment template which was eventually incorporated into the Trust's processes, a collaborative working relationship with other funding sectors, i.e. government, iwi and philanthropic organisations, a proactive Māori development small grants program, and a focus on continued research and evaluation. In 2016, Te Kāwai Toro met with a small group representing iwi, government and other philanthropic organisations. Together, they began exploring a collective funding approach to best support Māori aspirations and development. In May 2017, Ngāti Raukawa ki te Tonga, J.R. Mackenzie Trust, the International Funders for Indigenous Peoples and Philanthropy New Zealand organised the International Funders for Indigenous Peoples Pacific Regional Hui in Otaki at Te Wānanga o Raukawa. A year later, a meeting was held with 16 national funders and 7 Māori leaders who offered suggestions on how funders could best support Māori to achieve their aspirations. The outcome of the meeting will be presented at the Philanthropy New Zealand Summit 2019 in Wellington. In December 2018, Manaia King becomes the J.R. Mackenzie Chair. The Collective Funders Forum discussions, which began in 2016, adopted the name Kiwai o Te Kete. The relationship guidelines, Tikanga a Hui, which were suggested by each sector, is accepted.